wages, salaries, and other earnings. In our discussion about what's included in the gross income for a taxpayer, this is clearly a great place to start because for most taxpayers, their job is going to be the main source of their income, the wage they get, the salary they get from that. And so what we're going to look at here is how we deal with those wages and salaries, and also some of those ways we get paid that are not exactly just the cash at the end of the regular pay period, but other things that also need to be included in our taxable income. So we start with wages. Wages, salaries, and other forms of employee compensation are included in gross income. The employer needs to provide to the employee a W-2 that says what their annual compensation was, and different tax withholdings and things like that are also on that form W-2. And then the employee needs to attach the copy B of that W-2 to their tax return. And an employee is going to have a W-2 for each place of employment that they work at. So if you have more than one job, you're going to have more than one W-2. Now, it's also possible that there's like an employee relationship with somebody where the employer doesn't consider the person to be an employee, and so instead of providing that individual with the W-2, the employer is going to provide a Form 1099 instead. But again, that's just a different way of reporting the wages, the salaries that the taxpayers had. Now, we're going to get into some of the other situations where there's money coming in and it's going to be taxable. We start with child care providers. The pay received by a taxpayer for providing child care needs to be included in gross income, and this, even for temporary babysitting, is also going to be something that would be included if, in fact, the teenager who's babysitting makes enough money to qualify to pay taxes and all of that. Foreign income, U.S. citizens and resident aliens need to report income from sources all around the world, which means any sources of income outside the United States need to be included unless it's exempt by U.S. law. And we'll come back and we'll see that U.S. citizens and resident aliens living outside the United States may be able to exclude all or part of that foreign earned income. Okay, but we'll talk about that when we look at exclusions from gross income. Now, this foreign earned income, this applies to both earned income, like wages, and unearned income as well. Interest, dividends, capital gains, all foreign sourced income needs to be included in the gross income for the taxpayer. Advance commissions. Under the cash method, a taxpayer that's receiving advance commissions or other amounts for future services needs to include these amounts as income in the year that they are received, even if the money is not going to be earned until a future period. Cost of living allowances and reimbursements, these are generally, cost of living allowances are generally included in income, but an allowance for a federal civilian or federal court employee who's stationed in Alaska, Hawaii, or outside the United States, they're exempt from this, and it's not included as income if that cost of living has to do with that station and the place where it is that the person is working. Allowances that increase an employee's base pay as an incentive for taking a less desirable assignment, that's part of compensation, and that incentive to take that less than desirable assignment is included in income. Back pay. If the awarded amount in a settlement or a judgment for back pay is received, that back pay needs to be included in income. And these include payments that are made to a person for damages, unpaid life insurance premiums, unpaid health insurance premiums, and this is going to be reported on the W-2. Bonuses or awards that received from an employer are included in income and should appear on Form W-2 as well. If the award is in goods or services, it's included at fair market value is what's included in income. Now we'll see a little bit later that there are some specific types of awards that may be excluded from income. But in general, our starting point is that these bonus or awards received from the employer are going to be included in income. Severance pay and any payment that's received due to the cancellation of an employment contract needs to be included in income amounts. Okay, so even if it's on your way out the doors as an employee, that money that you receive is included in income. Sick pay, pay received from an employer while sick or injured, is part of the salary or wages. If the employer is paying it to you while you're sick, that's still part of your wages. In addition, employees need to include in income the sick pay benefits that are received from a welfare fund, a state sickness or disability fund, an association of employers or employees, and an insurance company if the employer paid for the plan. Okay? And so we're getting the sick pay. A lot of it's going to be includable in our income. Disability income, generally employees need to report as income any amount that they receive for personal injury or sickness through an accident or health plan when the employer pays the plan premiums. Okay, so when the employer is paying those plan premiums, whatever we receive under that is going to be included in income. If both the employee and the employer pay for the plan, well, then we need to allocate what it is that was received between what the employee paid the premiums for and what the employer paid the premiums for. And so it may be split in terms of how that is treated. Accident or health plans, generally the value of that accident or health plan coverage provided to a taxpayer by the employer is not included in income, but benefits received from the plan may be taxable. Okay, so the value of that plan itself is not included in income, but any benefits received very likely to be taxable. Now we also have fringe benefits, all of those different kind of small things that we receive, free child care perhaps, or a parking spot, or whatever the case may be, those fringe benefits. Fringe benefits received in connection with the performance of our services are included as income unless we paid for it. Okay, we paid for that fringe benefit, or the benefit is specifically excluded by law. And we're going to see when we look at exclusions, there's a number of fringe benefits, a lengthy list of fringe benefits that are specifically excluded from what we're going to include in income. Group term life insurance, generally the cost of up to $50,000 of group term life insurance coverage provided by an employer is not included in income, but the cost of an employer-provided insurance that exceeds the cost of $50,000 of coverage needs to be included in income, okay, if we don't pay for it. So up to $50,000 of life insurance, that cost is not included in income, but anything above that that the employer provides is going to be included in income. Restricted property, generally that fair market value of property that's received for services is income in the year that we receive that property, our restricted property received. A taxpayer does not include the value of stock or other property in income if there are restrictions that affect its value, the risk of losing that benefit. And the taxpayer must report the property as income once it substantially vests, and that means that once the taxpayer has the rights to receive it. It's not a restricted benefit anymore. And this takes us then to stock options. If an employee receives a non-statutory stock option, which also can be called a non-qualified stock option, that has a readily determinable fair market value when it is granted, okay, this option that we're receiving is going to be treated as other property received as compensation. Now, the amount of income to include depends on the fair market value of the option when the employee either exercises the option or sells or otherwise disposes of the option. Okay? So if it has a value when we get it, well, that's what's included in income. If it doesn't have a value when we get it, the amount and when we're going to include it in income depends on when we exercise it or otherwise dispose of it. But if the option is a statutory stock option, also called an incentive stock option, then the employee will not have any income until they sell or exchange the stock. And so this statutory stock option, if we get that, that's going to not have any income connected with it. And the tax treatment is more favorable than that from a non-qualified stock option. So just a slight distinction between them, but we're ultimately probably going to have a cost or an income, I guess, connected to our stock option. So we have an example here that goes through this. In 2008, Micromedia grants Doug non-statutory options, giving him the right to purchase 1,000 shares of Micromedia stock for a price of $25 per share. On the grant date, Micromedia shares traded at $5. Well, he has an option to pay $25 for something that currently costs $5. And so Douglas does not recognize income when he receives the options because his exercise price is above the current share price. Therefore, there is no readily determinable market value. In 2020, Douglas exercises his options when the price of the stock is $95. He receives $70,000 in compensation, which is the difference between what he paid, $25,000, and the value of the stock at exercise, $95,000. But Micromedia should include the compensation on Doug's W-2 and withhold any applicable Social Security and Medicare tax. And so the compensation is the difference between what they actually paid, the $25,000 in this case, and what it is that they received, the value that they received, in this case, $95,000. And this brings us then to tip income. If you're a waiter, waitress, a server in some way and you're collecting tips, all tips received directly, charged tips paid by an employer, and any tips received under a tip splitting or tip pooling arrangement are included in income. The IRS also considers non-cash tips such as tickets, passes, or other items of value as taxable income based on their value. So all of that tip income should be reported and is included in taxable income. Now, to report tip income correctly, employees need to keep a daily tip record. They need to report cash and charged tips to the employer by the 10th of the following month if more than $20. And they need to report all tips on the income tax return, with the exception of tips reported to the employer after the end of the year that will be reflected on the employee's W-2 in the following year. But again, the key thing here is keeping record of what it is that is being received as a tip. Tip income is subject to Social Security and Medicare tax. Taxpayer needs to give the employer a written report of all cash and charged tips if receiving $20 or more during the month. And the taxpayer must report the value of non-cash tips to the IRS on the tax return, but not to the employer. And the taxpayer does not pay Social Security, Medicare, additional Medicare, or the railroad retirement taxes on non-cash tips. So, a lot of things there. This is what we're including in our income. That's all connected to our kind of wages and compensation, what it is that we earned from our employer. I guess we can kind of summarize it in that if it came from your employer, it's probably going to be includable. We'll talk about some exclusions. We addressed some of them now, or said there's some like fringe benefits that may be excluded. But if we have something coming from our employer, our starting position is, well, we're probably going to be paying taxes on this unless it's something that is specifically able to be excluded one way or another. But this is our wages, our compensation, what it is that we're receiving from our employer. As I said at the beginning, for most taxpayers, this is probably the biggest source of income that they have.